Congress just handed ICE $75 billion. Here's what they're building with it.
Republicans are moving forward with a budget resolution that will allow us to fund critical functions that Democrats refuse to support. Law enforcement, drug interdiction, border security, protecting children, both our own and the unaccompanied minors who suffer human trafficking and worse under Democrats' open border policies. And to prevent Democrats from deciding that they want to defund law enforcement again in September, we're going to fund these critical functions for the next 3 years.
That money is going straight into facilities like this.
For months now, ICE has been quietly buying industrial warehouses around the country, reportedly with plans to turn them into a network of immigration detention and processing centers to hold tens of thousands of detainees. Our White House correspondent, Liz Landers, begins our coverage with a look into how the national and at times local controversy is playing out in one small Maryland community.
A national controversy lands on the agenda of a small Maryland city during an otherwise mundane weekly meeting. The Hagerstown City Council and mayor represent about 45,000 residents, but the broader community is bracing for the arrival of as many as 1,500 mostly undocumented migrants.
This huge warehouse right here was recently purchased by Immigration and Customs Enforcement as a detention facility. This is more than 800,000 square feet. And if it opens, it could be one of the largest detention facilities of its kind in the country.
During a couple of visits over a week, we saw anti-ICE vandalism, but no visible signs of ICE itself. We ran into Doris Kyle Shami and her husband Greg as we left the site.
The administration is ruining this country and is tearing apart communities that we need, and they're good people. You know, this has got to stop.
Locally, the facility will be primarily regulated by the Washington County Board of Commissioners.
All in favor by saying aye. Aye.
Protesters interrupted their meeting earlier this month, shortly after the board unanimously agreed to a resolution welcoming ICE.
Nobody ever expected it to become a place of residence.
We listened last week as the city's utility director briefed the council on its limited but critical role governing the facility.
Our authority starts and stops with the water.
In the audience, community members on both sides of the national and now local debate.
I don't think it's a good thing for Hagerstown if we get that.
I think it's a great thing. Hagerstown needs as much help as it can get in increasing the income per person. Having this facility will do that with jobs.
If there are people that are being held in this facility who haven't broken the law other than being in this country illegally, are you okay with that happening?
I am engaged to a man who is a political refugee from Bolivia who was naturalized as an American citizen. So for me, it's really personal that people come to this country legally.
Yeah, so they're going all around the country. We're seeing this happen all the way up in New Jersey, New Hampshire, all the way down to Orlando in Florida, all the way out west. They're trying to build places in Kansas and Oklahoma. This is all over the country. They're focusing on warehouses they can find a little bit outside of large towns. So we're finding these about 45 minutes to an hour outside of large city centers. And they're trying to fix these near logistics hubs where it's easy to move people in and out of the city. So we think that ICE officials have stated that their objective is to make the system of detention and deportation more efficient. And the current acting director of ICE, Todd Lyons, has actually compared his aspiration to Amazon's system of moving packages. He said, we want to be able to move humans around the country as efficiently as Amazon ships packages.
What's the overall cost of this? How much is the Department of Homeland Security and ICE spending on this?
So they're projecting to spend $38 billion. That involves buying the warehouses. Many of them cost around $100 million. That involves significant upgrades and retrofitting these warehouses to basically turn what are empty, vacant shells of buildings into a kind of functioning detention center with housing units, recreation areas, kitchens, outside basketball courts. They want to kind of like build these out and spending up to $150 million for a single facility in some cases.
What's happening here in this town, in this small town in Georgia, the constituents who voted for Donald Trump questioned their vote. They said, wait a minute, we didn't sign up for this. And I think there are a lot of Republicans across the country who are starting to realize that downstream, what Donald Trump is doing is impacting them. It was all good when it was, oh, it's okay if you go after those people or you do it somewhere else. But when it comes into their backyards, the byproduct of these policies, then people are starting to say, hold on a second, we don't like it. So this is something that's a challenge for Republicans, because Republicans used to be the party that didn't like the overreach of the federal government coming into states and localities and telling them what to do.
America is on the verge of its most intense spending spree on immigration enforcement in modern history. And what the nation has seen in terms of immigration sweeps so far this year, well, they will expand exponentially, fueled by tens of billions of dollars inside the new economic law President Trump signed last week. Since 2003, the year the Department of Homeland Security was created, spending on immigration's Customs and Enforcement, or ICE, has tripled. It has also tripled for CBP, that's Customs and Border Protection. In fact, since the mid-1990s, Border Patrol funding has increased 20-fold. This nation, under Republican and Democratic presidents, has poured billions of dollars into arresting and deporting undocumented immigrants, and those budgets are about to explode. What we haven't spent money on, comparatively, is immigration courts, where due process can expedite the removal of people here illegally. Again, since 2003, for every $1 we have spent on immigration courts, we have spent $24 on Border Patrol and ICE. And that is why, as of mid-2024, there was a backlog of 3.7 million immigration cases.
ICE is a just over $9 billion a year organization. And as you said, over the next 4 years, on top of that, they're going to have an extra $75 billion, which is just going to make it, it's going to be a presence in all of our lives from now on. And something similar, not as radical, but something similar is happening with the United States Border Agency, Customs and Border Protection, which includes Border Patrol, which is getting at least $65 billion in addition to its usual budget of about $20 billion.
That's a lot to unpack there. Let's start with ICE arrests, right? We're already seeing daily viral videos of arrests all over the country. Here in San Diego, we've seen workplace raids and courthouse arrests. What does this new funding source mean for enforcement going forward?
I mean, what we've all been seeing happening in Los Angeles since early June is sort of a proof of concept. This is what they were doing on basically a Biden-era budget. Congress didn't really give a significant increase this year. Now they have far more resources to carry out these kinds of operations. There is money. Okay, ICE has about 6,000 deportation officers or enforcement and removal officers who can do these agents who are doing these sweeps and these arrests. 6,000. The bill gives them money to hire 10,000 more. So the idea is to more than double, almost triple the size of this force. Of course, it takes a while to do the hiring, but in the meantime, there will probably be money to have National Guard, to have other agencies, everybody from DEA to the Bureau of Prisons, and of course, CBP and Border Patrol, as we've seen in Los Angeles, filling those shoes and increasing the tempo of those operations. The idea, and Trump administration officials are pretty clear about it, their idea is to expand that Los Angeles model to other populations around the United States.
The largest federal migrant detention center in American history has opened its doors. It is the latest effort to keep up with the Trump administration's mass deportation agenda. The migrant processing facility in Fort Bliss, Texas, near the U.S.-Mexico border, officially opening today. And News Nation correspondent Jorge Ventura is live in Texas. Jorge, who is expected and how many are expected to pack this mega facility?
Well, Natasha, the Trump administration continues to expand their mass deportation operation, and now we are learning that Fort Bliss is set to open today as a ICE detention facility with up to 1,000 beds already ready to go. Now, what ICE says is this is part of a $1 billion project that will now reshape how migrants are detained and ultimately deported. That ICE facility opening today is part of a $1.2 billion Defense Department contract. This massive new detention complex will begin with 5,000 beds up to 2027. Now, inside that facility, detainees will have access to legal help, medical treatment areas, and recreational space amenities. ICE insists that it will make it like a traditional facility. Supporters say it's meant to ease overcrowding at other detention centers and serve as a processing hub, sending migrants with final removal orders directly onto ICE air flights back to their home countries. Critics warn that it's not money well spent.
Fort Bliss will be home to the country's largest migrant detention facility. As we first told you back in March during a visit to Fort Bliss, Army Secretary Dan Driscoll announced his approval for federal immigration officials to build the new facility that will house 5,000 migrants. The $231 million contract is part of a $1.2 billion project to build a short-term detention facility for single adults. As you may recall, Fort Bliss and Biggs Field were being used earlier this year for deportation flights, returning migrants to countries such as Guatemala, Ecuador, and Honduras. It's also used as a hub for troops to undergo training before supporting customs and border protection operations. The project is expected to be completed by September 2027, but no word yet on when construction is set to begin.
According to the Washington Post, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement has started the process to shut down Camp East Montana, the migrant detention center located on Fort Bliss. The Post reports an internal document sent to ICE staff this week shows the agency is drafting a letter to terminate the facility's contract, though no timeline or reason is given for the decision. The $1.24 billion Camp East Montana has been open for about 8 months and has been used for immigration detention, drawing criticism over its cost and operations, including from attorney Robert Held, who says he's been inside the facility multiple times while representing a client there, something we've previously reported.
I'm happy that ICE has recognized the human rights disaster that they've created. My enthusiasm is tempered by the fact that we don't have a closing date and we don't know what's going to happen to the detainees that are there. I think the practical likely answer is that they'll be moved to a different facility.
El Paso Congresswoman Veronica Escobar also reacting to the Washington Post reporting, saying in part, quote, "The Trump administration has used El Paso as ground zero for its sick, twisted immigration enforcement policies for years, and Camp East Montana is no different. It represents the epitome of fraud, waste, abuse, and the exploitation of human suffering at the hands of private prison corporations and the Trump administration." We reached out to the Department of Homeland Security for comment, a spokesperson telling KFOX 14, quote, "ICE is always looking at ways to improve our detention facilities to ensure we are providing the best care to illegal aliens in our custody. The contract for Camp East Montana was inherited from the Department of War. DHS undergoes rigorous audits and inspections of our facilities to ensure they are meeting our high standards. DHS is reviewing this facility and contract. No decisions have been made related to contract extension, termination, or award." The report about a possible closure comes just one day after we reported that Camp East Montana was placed on quarantine following 14 active measles cases inside the facility, and after 3 deaths were reported in ICE custody since mid-December.
If this channel is new to you, subscribe and share your thoughts and concerns in the comments. Record today, protect tomorrow.